Gordon was very because he had been so helpful. At the next station, he found that the driver and fireman were very pleased with him. As time went on, Edward and Gordon would say, "Poop, poop, poop, serves you right. I'm going to poop, poop at Henry." And there was proud Gordon going slower and slower. Have a run to ease your joints and find... Come along, he fussed. There's plenty of time. Henry says it's hard to pull trains. People have never seen me pulling a train before. Come on, he puffed. All right, don't fuss. All right. Hurry, called Thomas. He was feeling very proud of himself, but the cars grew crosser and... No, and they giggled in their silly... I do, he cried. He rattled. You know almost as much about them as Edward. Then you'll be a really useful engine. Help! The engine... They're pushing me, he panted. On! He was hard at work, puffing backwards and forwards all afternoon. This'll teach you. Puffs proudly backwards and forwards with them all day. Panted, will the top never come? I've done it, he puffed. Hooray! That's why it was easy, said James, as he backed the other as hard as he could. Yard when Edward pulled up. Peep, peep, he whistled. Then... I've got to stop, groaned. But the tar wagons and some trucks were all to pieces. The fat controller met them.
Vengeance.
Henry tried very hard, but it was no good. When the Welsh cold came, Henry's driver and fireman were excited. Now we'll show them, Henry, old fellow.
Better. Signal lights shone green as they passed. A freight train was waiting in the siding to let the flying kipper pass, and the driver and fireman were drinking cocoa in the caboose. Glad to come home. A crowd of people waited to see him arrive in his new shape. Beep, he whistled. Thank you very much. For school, because they wait to see Henry go by. He does it so well that Gordon is jealous. But that's another story. To himself. When work was over, Thomas went to see the other engines. All their coats had been polished. Huh, said Gordon. Just look at us. Your driver will have to work fast to get you as smart as us. Later, Thomas was resting when Percy arrived. It took so long to clean Thomas that he wasn't in time for his next train. He chuckled to himself.
Gordon and Henry heard about the accident. They laughed and boasted. Fancy allowing cows to break his train. They wouldn't dare do that to us. We'd show them. To distance was a bridge. It seemed to Gordon that there was something on the bridge. His driver thought so too.
Next morning, there was James puffing away down the line. What a lark, he chuckled to himself. What shall I do? I can't stop. Help! Edward was panting up behind with every ounce of steam he had. At last, the inspector stood on Edward's front, holding a noose of rope in the crook of the shunter's pole. He was trying to slip it over James's buffer. The engines swayed and lurched. At last, got him, he shouted. He pulled the noose tight. So, the old iron caught you after all, chuckled Edward. I'm sorry, whispered James. Thank you for saving me. You were splendid, Edward. That's all right, replied Edward. Thomas was on his way to the harbor with a trainload of metal pilings. They were needed to make the harbor wall firm. Workmen coupled Trevor's car to Thomas's train, and soon they were ready to start their journey. I'm glad Sir Topham Hatt needs me, called Trevor. I don't have enough to do sometimes, you know. When they reached the harbor, they found everything in confusion. Cars had been derailed, blocking the line. Trevor was as good as his word. He dragged the pilings clear with chains and towed them into position. Who needs rails? Added Clarabelle. Everyone was sorry when it was time for... A small tear came into Trevor's eye. Thomas pretended not to see. He whistled gaily to make Trevor happy. I'll come and see you if I can. Wonderful, said Trevor. That evening, Trevor stood remembering his new friend Thomas, the harbor, and most of all, the children. Then he went happily to sleep in the shed at the bottom of the orchard. Yes, let's, said Percy. We don't want to, they grumbled. It was no... Harold was high and alongside. Doing things, Duck told them. The Great Western Way introduced him. Here is Diesel. I have agreed to give him a trial. The silly engines were flattered. He has very good manners, they murmured. We're pleased to have him in our yard. Your worthy Sir Topham Hatt to you. When Duck returned, Diesel was trying to take some cars from a siding. Oh! They screamed around to collect the other cars. Diesel had to help the workmen clear the mess. He hated it. All the cars were laughing and singing at him, but did cause confusion. Sir Topham Hatt had given them numbers, Donald 9 and Douglas 10. But he was still planning to send one engine home. There was a brake van in the yard that had taken a dislike to Douglas. Things always went wrong when he had to take it out. His trains were late, and he was blamed. Douglas began to worry. Donald, his twin, was angry. Oh! I am disappointed, Donald. I didn't expect such... clumsiness from you. Anyone would think, said Douglas, that Donald had had his accident on purpose. Fair. They all agreed that something must be done, but none knew what. Percy decided to talk to Edward about it. What you need, said Edward. Topham Hatt? Asked Duck thoughtfully. There was a long silence. I propose, said Gordon, that Percy be our disputation. Drowned in a delighted chorus of cheers and whistles. The twins were here to stay. Now, Thomas is indisposed. The rubbish turned out to be Annie, Clarabelle, and Henrietta. Their freight cars are filled with china clay. It is needed for pottery, paper, paint, and many other things. There's no real harm in them, he said to Boko, but they're maddening at times. Boko chuckled. Maddening, he said, is the word. It was their last afternoon, and Edward was preparing to take them to meet Bill and Ben. He found it hard to start the heavy train. Did you see him The driver, fireman, and conductor went along the train, making adjustments between the coaches. I've done it! I've done it! Puffed Edward. Steady, boy, warned his... Suddenly, he came to a drift that was deeper than the rest. Help! When the workmen arrived, it took some time to decide how to dig away the heavy drifts of snow. Thomas's driver and fireman, who had taken shelter at a nearby cottage, joined the rescue.